Welcome to the National Center for Biblical Parenting. We know that every family is unique and has its own challenges, so often children don't respond to the typical cues that are in parenting books, and having a more tailored or specific plan is helpful. Furthermore, every parent is different, not just every child, and so as we're working with parents, sometimes they need a plan that obviously suits them and fits them. We don't believe that there's just one good way to parent. There's lots of good ways to parent. You can look around at people you know, look around at people that you admire, and you can see that they might do it differently, and their kids do fine. So we're not suggesting that there's just one way to parent, but we do believe that there are a lot of good ways to parent, and we have to find the best way or a good way that's going to work with this particular child. So that's what the purpose is of these webinars, is to zero in on one particular family, try to understand that while other people are listening, so that they can learn from this one family, and even though their situations may be a little different, they may get some ideas from this one family as we try to zero in and hone in on some specific issues. So that's what we're going to do here today, and we've got Sharon on the phone. So I'm going to unmute you, Sharon, and I'm going to ask you some questions to get us started. Sharon. Let's just clarify that. It's Sharon, right?
Correct, Sharon.
All right, I'm sorry. I'll try to remember that.
Okay.
Okay,
No M on the end.
now let me ask you, who's in your home, first of all. I don't need to know the names of the people in your home, because this webinar is going to go into a library, and lots of people will listen to it over the years. But I would like to know if there's a husband in the home, and your children's gender and age.
Okay, my husband is in the home, and my oldest daughter is 8, and my youngest is 3.
Okay, and I understand we're going to talk about your 8-year-old today. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, why don't you tell me a little bit more, give me some background here as to what's going on with her, and then we'll try to work toward a plan.
Okay. My 8-year-old was recently diagnosed with ADHD,
Okay.
and how he came about to getting the diagnosis was in kindergarten. We noticed that there was a lot of conflict at school between her and other children. The teacher also noticed the hyperactivity as far as the impulse, the quick to get anger when she didn't quite understand things in a normal setting, not so much that she was getting upset because she didn't get her way, but even if she understood things one way and the teacher was trying to explain it one way, it was very challenging for the teacher. Moving on to first grade, the teacher noticed that there was a long period where her attention span was short. It was very hard to redirect her back to the classroom environment. Again, a lot of the argumentative back and forth with the adults if she didn't quite understand things, the hyperactivity, and the argumentative spirit with the other children. So it was causing difficulty just socially in the classroom environment. So after first grade, we got her diagnosed. She saw a specialist, and she rated very high based on her teachers in the past and based on my husband and I observing her and evaluating her through the diagnosis. The first semester of second grade, we did do medication, so we wanted to see what her second grade teacher would say, and sure enough, it was the same thing in class. Hard to stay focused. She wasn't getting through her class, her morning assignments, and she's very bright. She's very smart, very intuitive, and when I would bring her home to do the makeup work, she would do it just fine. So one-on-one settings were great, but in a group setting, it was a little bit more challenging for her. And so recently, in the last month, we started using medication if that would change. And sure enough, it did change, but there were some side effects. She was a lot more irritable. She was very sensitive to direction. To give her direction, it was very challenging to redirect her if she was already doing something, or there will always be, well, why do I have to do it this way, or can I do it this way? And so that's pretty much where we're at this point. We would notice that in our parenting, we gave her a lot of options when she was younger. So as she got older, it was kind of hard to kind of break that cycle, to not give her so many options and to let her know, okay, this is what we're going to do, as opposed to, do you want ice cream or do you want this, And so we noticed that that was something that we did in our parenting. And so at this point, we are trying to break that cycle, and so that there's less conflict, there's more obeying the first time. And I would say probably during the first 6 years, we did a lot of old school parenting, like, okay, if you didn't do what I asked you to do, you would get a spanking, until that spirit changed. But as we're learning that we have to get to her heart, that's been even more challenging, just to understand, like, what to do and how to get her to respond to the heart changes and not give up in the meantime because things don't go the way that I want them to.
Okay, so it sounds like we're dealing with a couple of issues here. Let me just pursue you with a couple of questions here. Now that she's, presently, is she in second or third grade?
She's second.
So she's in her second semester of second grade. So you're putting her, you had her start medication somewhere, what, the first of the year or something like that?
Yes, probably the second week in January.
Okay, and how is she, now we're in the end of, or the second week of March, or third week of March, so we've been 2 months. Have you found that you've come to a good level of the medication for her?
Yes. The first medication that we had her on was Concerta. There were some rebound effects where it would work. It was almost like they call it like the honeymoon stage, where we saw a difference, but then we started to see the irritability, the yelling at her little sister. Even when talking to her parents, she would yell at us, like, I don't want to do that, or,
Sure.
I am trying to calm down. Very, very argumentative.
Okay.
So we stopped that, and we started her on Adderall about 4 weeks ago, and that worked well, but then we started to see that she was starting to be more argumentative again, and it was hard for her to calm down in the moment and lashing out with angry outbursts. So we increased it to 15 milligrams just this past Saturday. So from that, the first 2 days, Monday and today, her teacher said that it was much easier to talk to her. She was calmer. But with putting her on medication, there also has to come techniques and behavioral modifications that goes along with the medication, that I want to make sure that now that she's slowing down her process, she's able to rationalize, how can I get her on the right track from this point?
Good. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So is she, in the last couple weeks, can we say, are you getting better reports from the school about her academics and her ability to focus?
Yes.
And are you getting better reports about her relationship with the other students, her ability to socialize more effectively?
We haven't had that conversation. She hasn't had any issues. Her foot she had stitches in her foot, so she wasn't interactive with the kids for about 3 weeks, so that was not an issue. She's been interactive with the kids in the last week and a half, last week and then this week. So I haven't heard anything negative except for last Wednesday and Thursday, she did go off on one of the kids. There was a situation that took place. She felt like she was being bullied. She was trying to assert herself. The teacher came in, tried to get her side of the story, and because another kid disagreed with her, she got really angry, really upset, and her teacher said that was the first time ever she saw her that emotionally upset. So at that point is when I spoke to her doctor again. He said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to increase her dosage to 15 milligrams instead of 10 milligrams, and we started that Saturday. So that took place Wednesday, Thursday of last week. She was having the angry outburst, and then we upped her medication on Saturday. Now, mind you, these things don't happen all throughout the day. It can be certain triggers. Like if a teacher doesn't empathize with her, then she's emotionally has a meltdown. If she feels like she's right in the situation and the other person is wrong, she will allow herself to get that angry to the point where she feels like she needs to be heard.
Okay, so do you feel like if we were looking at this from your daughter's eyes, would we say that when she feels like she's being mistreated or not understood, that's a significant trigger for her in her response, a negative response.
Yes,
Okay.
she would agree with that.
And it sounds like she, how have you experienced her at home? Does she come off the medication? I mean, is she coming down off that medication by the time she gets home with you in the afternoon and evening, or is she still,
Yes.
okay, and
By
so,
the time she comes home, the medication is wearing out.
okay, and so do you see her, at that point when the medication's wearing out, do you see her more intense at times, or do you see her, how does she handle that at that point?
Once she comes home, depending on the certain different situations, it could be maybe trying to focus in on homework. And if I'm trying to help her and she sees things one particular way and I'm trying to give her insight to do it maybe this way, that could be a trigger. So she's much more irritable and frustrated. That can be a situation, or it can be interacting with her little sister. Her little sister says something, and she says, "That's mean of you," and then she goes off. I would say until we are asleep, she's pretty much, it's a conflict through getting through bedtime routines, or just go brush your teeth. Okay, she goes to the bathroom and she's lollygagging, or and then I have to stay on top of her. So knowing that I'm there, it creates more frustration. Like, well, why are you here? I'm going to do it. Well, you're not doing it because I've asked you to do it, and now you haven't done it. So when I implement a consequence, then there's the meltdown again.
Okay, that makes
There's
sense.
the outburst.
Sharon,
So,
are you on a computer where you can see the screen or not?
yes, I can see the screen.
Okay, I want to describe. It sounds to me like what you're saying is that, especially when she's off the medication, we see problems of inflexibility. She's argumentative. She tends to see things as black and white, and has a hard time seeing it from someone else's perspective. And she reacts to all of those things in a negative way, usually an emotional way. Is that true?
That is true.
And when we see her reacting, she's reacting by lashing out, by saying hurtful things or yelling. It sounds like that's what you're saying so far. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, let me try to tell you what I think is going on, and then I want to try to give you some ideas of where we should go here as far as a strategy and moving forward, okay?
Okay.
First of all, when we're talking about attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, we're talking about being under this neurological behavior umbrella. That is, the brain is affecting behavior. And so when the brain is affecting behavior, we have certain challenges that we're facing that are biological issues. So in attention deficit disorder, the child has a hard time concentrating, focusing, or moving forward in that regard. But when the child has a hyperactivity component, that's a different additional part. Then the brain is sending signals to the body that say you need to act or move in order to be at rest. So the fact that she's fidgety or moving around a lot is that hyperactivity component that you're seeing as well. So that's another piece. Other things that you're not talking about because they probably don't affect your daughter are things that would fall under this umbrella as well. Things like bipolar is another one, autism is another. There's all these different things that fall under the neurological behavior umbrella. There are some things that your daughter's dealing with, it sounds like, that do not fall under that umbrella. They fall in a different bucket, shall we say, of weaknesses that your daughter has, and those are some relational weaknesses that she has, such as her argumentativeness or her black and white thinking or her inability to handle her emotion. Any of those things are these relational weaknesses relating to herself, others, authority, parents, whatever it is. She's struggling in that area. Those are two different categories, and so as we work with her, we want to understand the difference between them. Now, here's how they relate together. Your daughter has a threshold level, and that threshold level is the level at which, when the problems of life come up from the floor, and when they penetrate the threshold, then she acts out or she becomes overwhelmed. Now, her threshold in some respects is a little bit low in some areas, and so we see her being more angry or intense more often than we'd like to see because this threshold is low. Now, you can raise that threshold, and you've already done that by giving her some medication. So the medication helps, especially during the day, because when these problems are coming up from the floor, now to challenge her, they're not penetrating that threshold as easily, although last week we had an episode that was pretty intense, and the teacher commented about that's the greatest that she'd seen in her emotional intensity. So that's significant for us. But and we all have those times in all of our lives when we feel overwhelmed in a situation. So we need to know how to handle those. The threshold level that we've tried to raise here, though, is pretty significant. You can raise the threshold through medication, and that's what you've done. You can also raise the threshold through a character development, and that's where our specialty is, by doing some work with a child in order to help them raise the character threshold in their heart. See, when the medication level goes down, then the threshold level is reduced, and the child acts out, and you have a harder time, and less cooperation and so on makes it difficult. It's very important then for us at the same time that you're using medication as part of your therapy to be doing some heart work, as I'm sure you're already doing, but I want to put a laser pointer here and target the heart work in some particular areas. So I want to make some recommendations to you that some heart qualities we're looking for to develop in your daughter are, number one, I would suggest that we're going to develop flexibility. Okay, that's going to be an important quality because your daughter tends to see things as black and white, and we want to help her recognize there's other ways to look at the picture. We also want her to be able to adapt to situations like leave the TV program or the toys she's playing with and do something else without feeling upset about that, so we're going to increase her flexibility. That's one of our goals. Another goal that we want to do is we want to increase her cooperation level. That's going to deal directly with their argumentative spirit that you're mentioning. So cooperation becomes very significant here, so that when she starts to argue, we need to have an approach for dealing with that and try to help her along those lines. Let me stop right there just for a moment, Sharon. What do you think of what I've said so far? Am I on track with what you're thinking?
You know what? So far, you're pretty much on track with where we need to start, because flexibility, her ability to adapt and overcome, and her level of cooperation is exactly what we're dealing with. So.
Okay. All right, so let me give you some more ideas about how to do that. In order to let's start with cooperation, because cooperation requires that a person be somewhat flexible. They have to give up their agenda for someone else. And so the most important thing we're going to do here for your daughter is we're going to make her part of the solution. So it's very important that we allow her to be part of what's going on here. So what we want to do is we want to point out to her that we have it's apparent that we have a problem, and she's not happy. She's not happy in the afternoons and evenings when she comes home. We've got this continual challenge of dealing with behavior issues and so on, and discord between you and her or other family members. She's not happy with that. And so we're going to take off on that idea, and we're going to say, look, I've got an idea for you that I think is going to make your afternoon and evening more effective, and I want to be a coach in order to help you with that. Let me encourage you, first of all, although at times you may have to use consequences in order to help your daughter change, I think that you're probably going to want to do a lot more coaching of her as your parental attitude. So being the coach, I find that many parents are more like a referee in a hockey game where they say, oh, infraction, 5 minutes, penalty box. I'm not suggesting that's what you're doing, but I think what we want to have instead of that kind of an approach is more of an approach that's coaching the child along. In order to coach the child, we have to have a plan. So as we develop a plan for cooperation, it's going to have some key ingredients. And with a child who has attention deficit disorder in particular, that child has a hard time focusing or staying on track. So we need to give them small steps in this plan. We need to give them exactly what they need to do, because we're going to try to change the way the brain is working. We have some brain issues over here that we're dealing with attention deficit disorder. What that means is that inside the brain we have the neurotransmitters that are not functioning as fluently as they might in another child, and so what we are trying to do is do some brain training using some therapy exercises at home in relational routines. So I'm going to give you what those routines look like so you can work on those, but you just have to understand we're doing some brain work. Let me give you another illustration. Let's say we take a stroke victim who has lost ability to speak or walk. What that means is that the brain is dead in that particular area of the brain. It will never become back alive. That part has died because of lack of oxygen getting to that part of the brain. It will never come back to life. But instead, by doing the physical therapy with the child or the adult, whoever it is, and we're teaching them how to walk or talk, then we are helping to build new pathways in the brain. When you are helping a child with attention deficit disorder, which is a brain issue, to function more fluently in life, we're doing that using some brain exercises that build, I would suggest we're going to use the analogy, building grooves inside the brain, building pathways inside the brain so the child knows exactly how to get from point A to point B, knows exactly how to deal with the triggers that the child is facing. So in your case, I think you want to identify several arenas where your daughter is experiencing challenges. One of them is when you give her an instruction. Another is when you say no to her and she becomes argumentative. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for ways to build some strategies for her, and then we're going to identify those and practice the things that we need to move forward. Now, one of the ways we do that, as far as a plan is concerned, when we're dealing with cooperation, is we want the child to know exactly what she needs to do when we're talking about cooperation. And then we're going to provide her some affirmation in small steps. So I would suggest at least 3 parts to her responsiveness to you in receiving an instruction. One is the ability to answer back. So when you give her an assignment, she needs to give you an answer back that says, okay, Mom, or okay, Dad. I would suggest that with a child with attention deficit disorder, that it's probably best to pull her out of the activity before you even give her an instruction. Still at 8 years old, I might even hold her hands as you're giving the instruction, because it increases the stimulation, more stimulation to the brain in different ways in order for the child to attend. So I would tend to do that unless we've got some problem that would prevent us from moving that direction. But I want to hear an answer back, and then I want you to do the job as if on a mission. That means that's really important for a child with attention deficit disorder. Do the job as if on a mission. That means complete the task with it really important in your brain so that you're moving forward without distraction. So I'm giving you a simple task, like put your shoes in your bedroom or hang the towel up in the bathroom. You do that task as if you're on a mission, feeling a little bit of uncomfortable feeling until you get back to me. It's the mission idea. And then lastly, we want you to report back. Reporting back is really important because it teaches children accountability. So you don't have to go get her. She's coming to get you and say, I'm done. So the reporting back becomes a very important part of the process in your plan. Now, this therapy plan, this is an actual therapy we use in our office with children who have attention deficit disorder, is we're sending them on, I would suggest 20 times in the afternoon and evening, the time she gets home from school until the time she goes to bed, we're practicing the instruction routine. And I would suggest 20 times for you and 20 times for your husband, because we're building grooves in our brain. We're not just changing the way we give instruction. What we're doing is we're practicing instruction. So that becomes very important here in using this cooperation approach to try to do that. Now, I think we also need to basically what we're doing for her is we're scripting for her 3 things: how she's going to think, how she's going to act, and how she's going to trust God in the difference. So those are the trusting God in the difference is going to be really important in the flexibility. But in the cooperation, we're teaching her how to think differently and how to act differently when we come to these challenges that she has. So we're going to give her exactly what she needs to do. When she does it, we're going to affirm her. Not when I say affirm, I don't mean give her incentives necessarily. It's just the fact that you're doing well. I would say to her, here's what we're going to do. We're going to help you to be more successful in your relationships with your other students at school, relationships with teachers, relationships at home, and we're going to reduce for you the amount of conflict you're experiencing, because I can see that you're unhappy in life with a lot of the things that are going on. And so we're going to help you gain some control in this area so that you can be in charge of this. You're going to see amazing things happen in your life as we move forward. This is just one of the routines that we can develop in order to help her with cooperation. Let me get some feedback from you, Sharon. What do you think about what I've just said?
I think that's great. I think having that plan helps her to understand what to expect. You understand what I mean?
Yes.
Because when, like for an example, when I go into a situation, I give her, like before we go to church, we kind of go through the routine, we practice at home, like when do we obey? We obey the first time. If your teacher asks you to do something, you need to do it the first time with a happy heart.
Good.
When I go over those things with her, we have a much better outcome. When I do it with my 3-year-old, we have a much better outcome. So I think with this plan and doing it 20 times a day as a therapy, not only with myself but with her father, this can help too.
Yes, good.
So far it's very clear to me, and I have clear direction and a foundation to start.
Okay, let me encourage you to do something else here, because we want to transfer this very important concept here for your daughter to develop some change, and that is we're going to transfer responsibility to her. So I would suggest that you might write out on cards. She's at an age where she can read and certainly be able to understand this. So I would say you probably want to have a card for her, and instead of you saying to her as she's getting out of the car at school, remember obedience is doing the right thing right away with a happy heart, or whatever, however you define that. By the way, I like that. I think it's good. I would write that on a card, or have her write it on a card and say, all right, before you get out of the card, read me your card. How are you going to do today? So we're transferring responsibility to your daughter. It's her issue. You might put these 3 things on a card, or ask your daughter to do that, and so you're saying to her, all right, hon, what are the 3 things you do when I give you an assignment? Read them to me, because these are the things that are going to help you be more successful in life. Tell me what they are. Let's go through them. And so we're back to this coaching idea, okay? I'm trying to encourage the coaching idea instead of the threatening or the consequences approach. When she messes up, we say, whoop, wrong response. Let's try that again and let's move forward. Okay, so I just would encourage you to get her on board as much as you can. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the argumentation issue that we have going on. Arguing seems to be a tendency that she has. Now, tendencies happen in the heart. Jesus said it's out of the heart that the mouth speaks. So we know that the heart contains, it's one of the things that the heart contains is our tendencies, our operating principles. We tend to respond to things the same way over and over again. So we are trying to target her heart in the area of argumentation, because her desire to use dialogue or oppositional phrases whenever you ask her to do something is a tendency that's not good. So the first thing we have to do in that case is we have to change you, because it takes 2 to argue, and you have to, as soon as you sense you're in the argument, sometimes we don't even realize it till we're into the argument, okay? But as soon as you sense that you're in the argument, you want to pull back, and you want to say something, you want to move. A key way to get out of arguments, okay, is to move from the issue, whatever the issue is, to the process. That's where we're going here. We're moving from the issue to the process. The process is the way you're treating me. The issue is the dirty shirt or the video you can't watch or the having a snack right now. That's the issue. But when your daughter says why, and you feel like this is an arguing why, in other words, we're not asking why in a good way, we're starting the argument, right at that moment, you want to opt out of the argument, and you want to say, whoa, wait a minute, do you see what you're doing right now? The way you're treating me isn't right. I've already said no. We're not going forward talking about that, and the way you're treating me is not helpful. I'm feeling like you're beating me up here. Move to the process, because that's what's going to help you get out of the argumentation with her. She may still pursue you, but I want this. Oh, no, no. She may continue to get more intense and become angry in all of that because she just isn't getting what she wants. But you are not going to keep talking about these. You're not going to say, you know how many calories you've had today? No, we're not going to have that now. Do you know how many carbs are in that? I mean, you haven't had any vegetables. We're not going to go anywhere with that to continue the argument or to talk her into responsiveness, because rarely does that work. As soon as you say something, she comes up with another argument. So we're not going to have you say anything. You're going to only reflect on the process. Do you see the way you're treating me right now? This is wrong. We need to move in the right direction. So I'd encourage you to start training yourself to move to the process instead of allowing her to suck you into arguments. You do not have to give her a reason every time she asks a question if she's using that dialogue in order to create a demandingness that she has. Now, she has a bigger problem, and that's what I want to talk about here. She has a bigger problem where she is, we're calling it flexibility. We could call it a number of things. Flexibility is the positive quality. On the other side, if we were looking at the negative side of this, we might consider her self-focused, selfish, black and white thinking, and she only can view it from her own perspective and not get into the mind of someone else. That's the negative side, but we're calling it flexibility. So this is going to be a significant area that we want to see her change in. And so developing some flexibility over time will help her greatly, because now when she's jostled around a little bit in her mind, she immediately goes to emotional intensity and reacts to that, either by saying to her sister, you're being mean, or something like that, or just reacting to you with some kind of a temper tantrum. Her ability to move within a particular range is very difficult, and she easily goes off. So you can't bring this all to her at the same time. I'd be inclined to focus on these other things, the plan for cooperation first, get things moving in a positive way. It's very positive, by the way, because when she gives you an answer back, you're affirming her. Good job. I like the way you gave me an answer back. Oh, I can see you're going to do that job as if on a mission. You reported back. Good job. That's a sign of maturity. But really, you're contributing to our relationship in a good way. So lots of affirmation here, focused on the process of how she's handling it. Here, when we get down to arguing, we're still going to focus on the process, but at this point, we're going to opt out of it, and we're going to say, look, you need to think of a different thing to say. The way you're treating me is not right, so if you are going to whine and complain about it, you need to go somewhere else and whine and complain. You need to come back and let's have a positive relationship together, because that's what I want. So come and join us when you're ready. So that's how we're handling those things. So I don't mean to give you too much at the same time here, but somewhere down the road, you're going to target what I believe is a root problem or a foundational problem for her, which has to do with this self-focused approach to life. She believes she's right. And because she believes she's right, then she justifies her anger or intensity or anything. So if she's misunderstood, she believes she's right. If she doesn't get her way, she believes she's right. And likely she is many times. People don't understand her, and she doesn't know how to handle that. So that whole area then is going to be a major source of concern that you're going to want to work on. So I would suggest you're going to think of ways to get her thinking about other people, not just herself, by having her try to articulate someone else's point of view. That's going to be just one straight, whether it's her sister's point of view or your point of view, to ask the question, why do you think your sister took that piece of Legos away from you? Or why do you think your sister's unhappy with what you did to her right now? Tell me what do you think, why do you think she's unhappy? So instead of saying, well, I'll tell you why I'm unhappy, which is her typical response, we want to get her thinking about other people, and then we're going to try to build in her some qualities like flexibility or tolerance of other people or compassion. All of those qualities, I think, will help ease the whole anger situation that she's experiencing. So I would suggest that working on that in some significant ways will also help you as you're moving forward. How does that strike you? Does that make sense to you?
It makes a lot of sense. Everything that you said is just right on key with what we're dealing with at home every day.
Okay.
And I think from my husband and I perspective, we've always probably just kind of went right along with the arguing process, trying to get her to understand and trying to get her to manipulate and change her thinking process because we say so, but never focusing on helping her to be out of herself to consider other people.
Good.
So I got that part because from my mind, she's very quick to justify. She comes up with very clever answers, and sometimes I even get like challenged, like, oh, okay, what did I just do? You know, so I feel like at times I'm the child.
Yes.
You know, so having putting my mindset into the coaching mode. Sometimes I feel a little insecure with how do I coach? Where do I come from to even help her in this process? Yeah. But this definitely helps a lot. So.
Good. Okay, so one of the things if you're gonna coach her and be effective, one of the things you want to do is you want to identify the plan, have her own the plan as much as possible. I mean, she's going to help develop it, and then we're going to move forward with holding her accountable to her plan. When I say to help her develop a plan, I might draw a T-chart like this, and I might say, here's your name, daughter. Okay, I'll just put daughter there. And here's some suggestions I have. I'm going to give you a lot of ideas of how you can solve this problem, but I want you to tell me which one of those you want to slide over to your plan. So this becomes a visual way for her to choose which solutions are going to be most appropriate for her plan, because we're going to develop a plan that she can embrace. We want her to own that as we're moving forward. Here's a couple of things I just want to say to you that I think you need. One is you've got to have successful times with her. So we want to work. If she's going to be miserable, then there's not a lot you can do about that. It's going to be a bad time. But any way you can control the situation or influence the situation, you want to create some. You want to have a successful day or successful evening. Right now, I get the impression that much of your afternoon and evening is rather conflict-filled. And so what we're going to say to her is, hey, let's work really hard today, you and me. Let's be a team. That's the coaching attitude. Let's be a team to try to get through the rest of our day from now, which is 5 o'clock, until 8 o'clock when you go to bed. Let's see if we can get through all the things we have to do, which is homework, mealtime, getting ready for bed, and so on. Let's try to do that being on the same team. And what you really want to do here is break the cycle of negative days with some positive days in order to create some hope. So I'd really try to do whatever we can in order to move forward to try to break the cycle and try to get some positive days in there. And I think that then you're going to see some momentum built up for more positive days as you're going forward. One more thing I want to say is that although your daughter has an anger problem, we have not spoken today specifically about anger. And the reason we haven't done that is because in your case, in this case of your daughter, I believe that the anger is a symptom. And the anger problems that she will go away without us going into our anger therapy sessions, which we could have done. I could show you how to deal with anger. But I think in this case, the anger is a symptom of her lack of flexibility, her lack of cooperation, her argumentative spirit. And if we can address those things, I think you'll see her intensity drop in the midst of that. So I think you'll find some real help in that if you work on these things. And if she does get angry and upset, we're going to have to still deal with that, but I think the solutions are going to be in another area, and that is dealing with these heart qualities that she needs to develop. What I want to do now, I think it'd be good for us to open the phone lines and allow some other people to ask some questions or make some comments about what you've heard so far. And so you have a couple of choices, folks. One is that you can use the software to raise your hand. There's a little button at the bottom on the right-hand side. And if you click on that button, it raises your hand and we'll know that you want to ask a question. If, on the other hand, you don't have a microphone or you prefer, you can type in the chat feature on the bottom right-hand side a question, and we will be able to read that question and try to respond to it and answer that. So if you're thinking of a question, you go ahead and do that. I just need to write down a few things that we talked about here. If we don't have any questions, I got lots more to say. Oh, there we go. Okay, hold on.
You ready?
I'm ready. Go for it.
Okay. Penny, I've unmuted you. Do you have a question for us?
Yes, I do. I have 5 children that are all adopted, and the 4 of them are boys that were adopted out of foster care. And, of course, they all have ADHD, post-traumatic stress, et cetera, et cetera. I'm very familiar with the anger issues. We have tried to work through some of these plans. They were on a lot of medication when we first got them. We were able to, with diet and actually introducing them to church, remove them from all of the medications. We recently had to put the one that's 9 back on medication because he is just so extreme.
Sure.
We don't know how to help him because the simplest thing, and there's no pattern, sets him off, even with the medication.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
like you said, he feels justified. He feels like he's right and everyone else is wrong, and we try to step out of the argument. So where do we go from there?
Okay. So you've got a number of things going on at the same time. Let me just review. We had talked about this umbrella of neurological behavior issues. That's attention deficit disorder, okay? That's under the umbrella, and maybe some other issues may be under there. But there are some things that are not under the umbrella that you're talking about, and I just want to talk about those. Reactive attachment disorder, post-traumatic stress syndrome are not under the umbrella. They're not brain-related issues. They come from different sources, usually past experiences with children. When a child has reactive attachment disorder, for example, that usually comes from a lack of bonding or something like that, which is very typical in a child who's been adopted, as I'm sure you know, especially a child who's been adopted, then got into the foster care system, and finally they get into your home. So we've got some real issues there. And reactive attachment disorder is the inability to manage emotions in the context of relationships. And so these children have a hard time emotionally connecting, and either they pull back emotionally or they explode emotionally. And so the approach that we take with them, it has to be very strategic. Okay, so that's one of the things that is going to be important here. Also, the fact that your son is adopted and you're working with him now at 9 years old means that we've got a lot of things we've got to work on in order to do what I would consider heart repair. I believe that all children who are adopted, even children who are adopted at birth, experience heart damage. Now, God heals people, and some of those children who are adopted, whether at birth or later in their lives, experience a tremendous amount of healing just being in a loving home. But I find that most of the children need experience with some kind of therapy, and I believe that parents are the best therapists for their kids in order to move forward. So one of the things we have to do, okay, is we're going to have to approach this on a multifaceted method here with your 9-year-old, and I'm just going to kind of hit the high points here. I mean, we would benefit from probably going quite deep with him in order to know how to address specific things. But the categories are these. One is we've got to emotionally connect. We've got to do the repair of the heart that is addressed in the reactive attachment disorder issue. What we're trying to do in that particular area is we're trying to rebuild some of this emotional connectedness and the ability to deal with emotions in relationships. So that's going to come in a variety of different ways. I'm not... And I don't know what that looks like for your son. We have to find out which ways he connects. Sometimes it's tangible ways. We're rubbing his back at night when he goes to bed, or we're teasing with him and playing teasing games that involve tactile stimulation. Sometimes it's just sitting across from each other and talking and listening to a child. Other times it's playing games, doing activities, having to be a helper. I don't know what it is, but there's a sense of teamwork and connectedness that we're trying to establish with him. So that's one of the things we're going to work on, is we're going to try to establish this sense of connectedness. So that's one of the categories that you're going to work on. A second category that we're going to work on is relational routines. So we've got to be, because he has attention deficit disorder and these other areas, he needs small building blocks to work himself into the complexity of mature relationships. And relationships are far more complex, I'm sure, than your son is able to handle. So we're going to have to break that down in very simple routines. So that's why this instruction routine idea would be helpful. We actually have we have several strategies in a box that we offer called Heartwork Training Manuals and CDs. I just recommend to you that you're going to need that. You're going to use it with all of your children, it looks like, having all adopted and of varying different ages. I would just recommend that you're going to find a lot of strategies in there. The instruction routine is just one of those. There's 5 parts for the parent, 5 parts for the child, and what we've tried to do is break everything down into small pieces for these children because they need the small building blocks. So that's just about giving instructions. Then we need another set of strategies for correction, because children don't value correction, they react to it, and so we're going to have to develop some more strategies for that. You're going to have to take apart the dynamics of relationships for your son, in particular. That's who we're talking about, your 9-year-old, and we're going to have to rewrite the script for him in very, very simple, concrete, practical, hands-on terms so that he can do it. And then we're going to, if we can, at 9 years old, my goal is to help him own it as much as we can. And then we're going to practice. It's the practice sessions that build the affirmation between you and your son that say, hey, we're going to do some work here. Let me explain to you that the work we're doing is brain training. It's going to help you with your brain. It's relationship training. It's going to help you with relationships for the rest of your life. It's parent and child training because we want to have a strong relationship. So that's why we're doing it. And we're going to spend some time working on this, and then we're going to enjoy watching a movie or going out for ice cream or whatever you want to say. Those kind of incentives you can place into the picture in order to motivate a child to have a positive experience. We're looking for positive experiences here in order to move forward. I know we have to go to consequences, and we have a lot to say about consequences, but it's also important to move forward in some ways that are very small and very positive and encouraging and with this coaching attitude. So those are just a few areas. That's like an overview for you, but you obviously have a lot going, and God bless you for adopting all those children, especially out of the foster care system. We need more people like you who are willing to open their homes and go through the difficult task. I think very difficult task, because you know I've adopted children myself. Very difficult task of raising children through that process of healing that's needed in their lives. Somebody else, Joanne?
Yes, Scott, I have a question here from a parent who says, what do you do when your child just snaps? And by snaps, she means you can be in a situation that he doesn't like Sunday school, not wanting to participate, and then he just starts crying and pouting, and even some acting out.
Katie, how old is this child? 9 years old. Okay, that's helpful to know. And so he, can I say he or she? You can type that in while we're going here. All right, so he has a hard time because he cries and pouts and he just snaps. Now, when you say snaps, are we talking about sadness here, or are we talking about anger? Because you're talking about crying and pouting, but you haven't told me whether it's sadness or anger. Okay, so we're dealing with anger, and so what's happened to him, at least in the little bit of information I'm getting out of your chat messages, is that he's feeling overwhelmed with the situation. Whether he didn't get his way, or they're asking him to do something he doesn't want to do, he's embarrassed, or somebody put him on the spot, or he's being corrected. I don't know what it is, but he's feeling overwhelmed in that moment. So I would work with him to talk to him about what it means to feel overwhelmed and how we deal with that. And I would draw 2 parallel lines on a piece of paper, and I would say normal emotions fall within those lines. We feel a little bit frustrated, excited, angry, whatever, that's okay. Or we feel a little sad, discouraged, and so on, that's okay. All of that's within the normal range. But when you cross the line, then we have a problem because you're acting out or feeling overwhelmed. And so that I'm trying to draw attention in a visual way to crossing the line. And now we can tell you're crossing the line because you're crying, you're upset, and you're pouting. And so what we want to try to do is help you to move forward there in order to come back down into the normal range. Let's develop a plan now for you when you get upset. Now, what's happening when you say he snaps, that gives me the impression that what you're saying is that it happens instantaneously, and with that, this instantaneous response, what we're seeing is that what we need is he's moving from emotional trigger to behavioral responses, and that middle component of his thinking is not developed well enough. So we're going to engage into a number of intellectual or logical discussions about anger, and most of these are going to take place when he's not angry. So when he's calmed down, we're going to say, I notice that you sometimes have a hard time, and then you snap, and it creates a problem for you. Let's talk about anger and emotion a little bit. I don't think anger is a bad emotion. I just think it can be misused. And so God has given you an extra scoop of emotions, but you got to know how to manage it, because it sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed, and then when you feel overwhelmed, then you can't handle yourself properly. So I want to help you with that. I get angry too as a mom or a dad. I get angry, and I want to and so I can give you some ideas of things I've done, but you need a special plan for you, and so I'm going to help you develop that plan. So we have lots of ideas about anger management. You can, the best solution for you in anger management is to take the class in Biblical Parenting in University called Taming Emotions in Family Life. It is a 4-hour class plus 5 webinars like this, just focused on anger. And you might even have your son listen to parts of that to get some ideas about how to manage that. So Biblical Parenting University is our online parent training university where you can get online courses. But you need practical strategies. He needs to know how to deal with this overwhelming feeling that he's having, and he has to have practical ways to do that. And it's mainly going to be the development of the brain, that part of the intellectual part there, that's going to help him have a check between his trigger and his response. That's where we're moving there. Joanne?
Scott, I've got two hands raised, and Sharon has a follow-up question.
Let's
So
go back.
let's go to Francis, who's been waiting for quite a while.
All right,
okay?
go ahead.
Francis?
Hi, Francis.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I have several questions, but one I would like to ask is I really liked your T chart that you made earlier
Yes.
with the daughter on one side and suggestions on the other. Could you just maybe draw for me an example or give some examples of suggestions, just a little more so I could see clearly what that might look like?
Yes, I can. But I don't know where I put it. But let's do this. Let's go to another one. Okay. If we have a T-chart like this and I draw this out for a child, I say to a child, let's say the problem is with a child that you are reacting, let's say we take a problem like I correct you and you react by yelling at me, okay? That's the problem we're targeting here. And I can tell that when you're corrected like that, it's hard for you. So I'm going to give you several suggestions here, and you're the daughter, and I want you to tell me what things are going to work for you. And so I'll ask some questions first of her. Tell me what you're thinking when you get corrected. And so that's the first thing I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about thinking solutions. What can you say when you're being corrected? One thing you could say, I mean, here's what other people say. You can tell me which things are best for you. Some people say things like, I can learn from this. That's a good way to respond to correction. Or what we're doing is we're identifying what is right thinking in regards to her particular arena. Remember, all anger issues happen within an arena. So you want to identify those arenas. My arena is my annoying brother. My arena is that I don't like to be interrupted for my video game. Oh, those are arenas, okay? I'm just suggesting an arena that has to correction. And so we're first identifying thinking kinds of things, and we're saying which one of those would be most helpful for you, suggestions that you can address. It might be, I need to remain calm, or it's not worth it to get upset in the midst of this. All of those things you can imagine thinking errors, not thinking errors, thinking solutions, and then you ask her, which ones of those do you think would be best for you? Tell me. And then the next thing, we're teaching children how to think differently, and we're teaching them how to act differently. What are some things you can do that would act differently? Some kids might just be quiet. Others might take a deep breath. And so we're identifying different things that she can do and say, which ones of those do you think would be best for you? Or maybe even, and often when I'm doing this with children, they'll say, oh, I tell you what I need. And they tell me something that isn't even on the suggestion side. They just tell me what they like to do, and we can adapt that a little bit or use it. And now we're developing a Diane plan for her so that she can own it. That's really what we're doing when we're trying to develop a ownership with a child. We're saying, I can give you a lot of ideas, but I want you to tell me which ones work best for you as we're moving forward. And then we're going to hold the child accountable. That's a different part of the process. But at least this is how we develop the plan with a child. I'm going to go back to Sharon.
Sure. What she's asking is, Sharon wants to know, what can you do or suggest to help improve the teacher interaction with their daughter?
Okay, the teacher interaction with your daughter, first of all, you want to do everything you can with the teacher to inform the teacher of the things that are working with you at home. We don't want to criticize the teacher, but we want to offer the teacher suggestions because the teacher is obviously frustrated with your daughter and doesn't quite know how to respond. So what things work? You're not going to be able to even say that tell her what works until you practice this a little bit and you see. You'll identify some things that work specifically with your daughter and things that don't work. And then you want to transfer those suggestions to your teacher. But more importantly, you want to work with your daughter on how your daughter can improve the relationship with her teacher. So we're going to develop skills and break that down in very specific steps that show your daughter how she can respond to the teacher more effectively. And that means we're getting out of her own selfish thinking sometimes. We're going to say, tell me what your teacher was thinking. You're probably going to hear complaints about this at home. So continually you're asking the question, wow, that seems really strange your teacher would do this. What do you think she was thinking when she did that? And so we're trying to imagine, and you may have to imagine for your daughter, the things the teacher was thinking when she did a particular action. So you're going to encourage your daughter to be responsive to the teacher, to think of things. What are some things that would make your teacher happy or delighted or pleased with you? Why don't we do this? Why don't you take in why don't you write a note that you think would be encouraging for your teacher? And so we're looking for ways to enhance the relationship with the teacher. Then we're teaching her how to handle the various dynamics that happen. When your teacher gives you an instruction, here's how you respond. Correction. All those things you're working on at home using some therapy strategies at home, you're going to give your daughter tools that she needs in order to respond more effectively to the teacher. So That's probably the next stage down the road. I would expect that you'll give some hints now, but before that, you want to find some success things going at home because we're building on success. That's what we're trying to do. You want to have some successful evenings from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock at night, and then after that, we want to identify what made this successful, and then we're going to build on that. Your child starts to have hope, and we say, oh, that was a great idea. You do well at that, and we're affirming what we're seeing there, and then we say, why don't you try that at school? Do it and report back to me, and we're working from the side of your daughter to improve the relationship with the teacher as well. Okay, we need to close out this particular webinar, but what we've tried to do is we're taking a child. Here's a child on medication who has attention deficit disorder, and that medication wears off toward the end of the day, and so we need to, at the same time we're using a medication therapy, we also need to be using character or heart training in the life of this child, and that's going to require therapy to build the grooves in the child's head in order to be most effective and have new patterns of relating. In essence, what we're doing is we're building the heart tendencies inside of a child by breaking it into small building blocks, by doing a lot of affirmation, coaching the child from one place to another, helping the child see some success in some relational techniques, and then we're trying to transfer those to other areas. This is a long-term process. It's going to take you years, but I think you'll see some significant progress that will encourage you within a few weeks at longest, maybe even a few days, you'll see some significant change. We love to do these webinars, and if you're here listening to this particular one, maybe you have an idea of another webinar you'd like to see us do, you can shoot us an email. Maybe you yourself would like to be a featured parent, and then allow us to try to troubleshoot your situation while other people are listening. We'd love to have you be a part of that as well. If you want to do either of those, you can email Joanne, and she will help you get started in the process so we can schedule you. We have some openings next month in order to make that happen. Also, I just want to recommend to you, visit our website, biblicalparenting.org and biblicalparentinguniversity.com. Both of those websites contain more resources that will help you as you're working with your children. Very specific, practical, biblical tools that will help you understand how to work with your kids. Thank you very much for your time with us today.